When I said no to babysitting, my sister dropped her kids at a stranger's house, so I finally called CPS after years of enabling her negligence. She had texted me at 7 a.m. demanding I watch her 3 kids because she wanted to go to brunch with her new boyfriend, and when I reminded her I had a job interview at 10, she said, "Your interviews never work out anyway." I'm Rebecca Sterling, 28 years old, and I spent 6 years being my sister's unpaid childcare while she treated motherhood like an optional hobby. That morning, staring at her dismissive text, something snapped. I typed back, "No, find someone else." Then I silenced my phone and focused on preparing for my interview at Morrison Tech, the kind of opportunity that could finally launch my software engineering career. What I didn't know was that my refusal would trigger a chain of events so reckless, so dangerously negligent, that even our parents would struggle to defend Melissa's actions. By noon that day, 3 children under 7 would be abandoned with a complete stranger, and I would be the one making the call that would dismantle my sister's entire charade of responsible adulthood. Melissa was 33, with 3 children from 3 different fathers, Aiden, 6, Emma, 4, and baby Noah, 18 months. None of the fathers remained involved beyond sporadic child support payments that Melissa spent on herself. She worked part-time at a nail salon, 20 hours weekly, yet somehow treated her schedule like she was running a Fortune 500 company. The reality? She spent more time dating than parenting. Our parents, Helen and Richard Sterling, had enabled this pattern since Aiden's birth. They provided financial bailouts, emergency childcare, and endless excuses for Melissa's irresponsibility. "She's still finding herself," Mom would say, conveniently ignoring that Melissa was in her 30s with 3 dependents. Meanwhile, I had been expected to help family since graduating college, which meant sacrificing my job search, social life, and any semblance of boundaries. The breaking point had been building for months. Last month, Melissa called me at 11 p.m. demanding I drive across town because she wanted to go clubbing and her babysitter canceled. The babysitter was our 72-year-old grandmother, who'd wisely declined after Melissa returned home at 4 a.m. the previous weekend. 2 weeks ago, she dropped the kids at my apartment unannounced because she had a mental health day at the spa. A 5-hour indulgence she documented extensively on Instagram while I canceled plans with friends. But this morning was different. This morning, I had something that mattered more than keeping peace. A second-round interview for a senior developer position at Morrison Tech, one of the fastest-growing software companies in Seattle. The first interview had gone exceptionally well, and the hiring manager specifically mentioned they needed someone who could start immediately and handle high-pressure deadlines. Being late or canceling would eliminate me from consideration. I'd told Melissa about this interview 3 days ago, emphasizing its importance. She'd responded with a distracted cool while scrolling through dating apps. Now, at 7 a.m. on interview day, she expected me to sacrifice this opportunity for her brunch date with Kyle, a personal trainer she'd met a week ago and was already calling her soulmate. After sending my refusal text, I continued preparing. Professional blazer, portfolio of projects, rehearsed answers to potential technical questions. My phone buzzed incessantly with Melissa's increasingly aggressive messages. "You're so selfish." "Family is supposed to help each other." "Mom and Dad will hear about this." I ignored them all, focusing on my preparation with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The interview went brilliantly. The hiring manager, Patricia Chen, was impressed with my problem-solving approach and code samples. We discussed salary, significantly more than I'd hoped, and she mentioned they'd likely make a decision within 48 hours. Walking out of that building at 11:30 a.m., I felt a surge of hope and validation. Maybe saying no was exactly what I needed to do more often. Then my phone exploded with notifications. 16 missed calls from Mom, 9 from Dad, 7 from an unknown number, a dozen texts in our family group chat. My stomach dropped as I unlocked my phone and saw Mom's most recent message. "Rebecca, where are you? Melissa dropped the kids at some woman's house and disappeared. This stranger called us. Get home now." My hands shook as I dialed Mom back. She answered on the first ring, her voice high and frantic. "Rebecca, thank God. Do you know where Melissa is?" "No. What happened? What stranger?" Melissa knocked on some random woman's door, a complete stranger, claimed she was your neighbor, and you'd agreed to watch the kids but weren't answering your door. She left all 3 children with this woman, said she'd be back in an hour, and vanished. The woman, Linda, She's called us because Melissa isn't answering her phone and it's been over 3 hours. The blood drained from my face. What's the address? Mom rattled off an address 4 blocks from my apartment building. A residential street I'd never lived on, populated by families and retirees. Melissa had literally knocked on a stranger's door and abandoned her children there. I'm 20 minutes away, I said, already running toward my car. Have you called Melissa? Constantly. It goes straight to voicemail. Your father is trying to reach Kyle, but we don't even have his number. Rebecca, this woman Linda sounds terrified. She has a newborn of her own and doesn't know what to do with 3 strange children. I drove faster than I should have, my mind reeling. This wasn't just irresponsible, this was criminal neglect. Melissa had endangered her own children by leaving them with an unvetted stranger simply because I'd refused to babysit. What if Linda had been dangerous? What if something had happened to the kids? When I arrived at Linda's house, the scene was controlled chaos. Linda Fitzgerald, a woman in her mid-30s with exhausted eyes and a baby in a carrier, opened the door looking utterly overwhelmed. Behind her, I could hear Emma crying, Aiden's voice raised in frustration, and Noah screaming at a pitch that suggested a dirty diaper. Are you Rebecca? Linda asked desperately. Yes, I'm their aunt. I'm so sorry. Your sister said you were neighbors, that you'd agreed to watch them but weren't home yet. She seemed so confident, so normal that I believed her. But then she didn't come back, and when I tried calling the number she gave me, it was disconnected. I finally found your parents through Facebook after recognizing their last name on Aiden's backpack. My parents' car pulled up behind mine. Mom rushed past me, apologizing profusely to Linda while gathering Emma into her arms. Dad went straight for Noah, whose diaper had indeed needed changing hours ago. I stood frozen, staring at Aiden, who sat quietly on Linda's couch looking small and scared. We're so sorry, Mom kept repeating to Linda. Our daughter, she's been under stress. Your daughter abandoned 3 children with a complete stranger, Linda interrupted, her voice sharp now that help had arrived. I have a 4-month-old. I'm not licensed for childcare. I don't have car seats or the supplies for 3 additional children. If something had happened to them, if one of them had gotten hurt, I would have been liable. This isn't stress. This is criminal. We'll handle this, Dad said firmly, but I could see the shame in his face. The reality was finally too stark to excuse away. Linda looked at me directly. She said you'd refused to babysit because of some interview. She made it sound like you were being unreasonable, prioritizing work over family. I had a job interview, I confirmed quietly. Melissa knew about it for days. She wanted to go to brunch with her boyfriend. Linda's expression shifted from anger to something closer to pity. She left 3 children, 3 babies, with a stranger for brunch? The drive back to my parents' house was silent except for the children's presence. Mom had convinced Linda not to call the police by promising to handle it internally, though Linda made it clear that if anything like this happened again, she'd have no choice but to report it. I followed in my own car, my interview triumph now completely overshadowed by Melissa's recklessness. At my parents' house, we settled the kids with snacks and cartoons. Emma had stopped crying but clung to Mom. Aiden remained quiet, his 6-year-old face showing more worry than any child should carry. Noah, once changed and fed, had fallen asleep in Dad's arms. Where is she? Mom kept saying, checking her phone obsessively. It's 3 p.m. Where could she be? I sat at the kitchen table, opening my laptop. While Mom and Dad fussed over the children, I began documenting everything. I took screenshots of Melissa's text from that morning, her demands, her insults about my interviews, never working out. I wrote down Linda's account word for word while it was fresh. I pulled up Melissa's Instagram, screenshotting recent posts of her at clubs, spas, dates, with timestamps that corresponded to times she'd claimed to be too exhausted to care for her own kids. What are you doing? Dad asked. Noticing my focused typing, documenting, I replied simply. Something in my tone made him pause. He'd known me for 28 years, recognized when I'd shifted from passive acceptance to active resistance. Rebecca. She left 3 children with a stranger, Dad. She put Emma, Aiden, and Noah in potential danger because I wouldn't drop my career advancement to enable her brunch date. This isn't a mistake anymore. This is a pattern, and it's escalating. Mom emerged from the living room, her face pale. You're not suggesting— I'm not suggesting anything yet, I interrupted. I'm simply collecting facts. The front door burst open at 6 p.m. Melissa waltzed in, sun-kissed and relaxed, carrying shopping bags from upscale stores. She stopped when she saw all of us in the living room, her children, our parents, and me with my laptop. "Oh, there you are," she said brightly, as if she'd been searching for us rather than abandoning her responsibilities. Kyle and I had the most amazing day. We went to this incredible brunch spot in Madison Park, then walked around downtown, and he bought me this adorable dress. "Where were your children?" I asked quietly. She blinked, confused by the question. "With that neighbor lady. She seemed nice. Said she didn't mind watching them for a few hours." "A few hours?" Dad's voice was dangerously low. "Melissa, you left at 8 a.m. It's now 6 p.m., 10 hours. Has it been that long? Time flies when you're having fun." She laughed, completely oblivious to the horror on our faces. "Plus, I figured since Rebecca wouldn't help, I'd find someone who would. That lady seemed happy to have the extra kids around." "That lady is a stranger you met this morning," Mom said, her voice trembling. "A complete stranger whose door you knocked on and lied to, claiming Rebecca was her neighbor and had agreed to watch the children." Melissa's smile faltered slightly. "I didn't lie. I found a solution. Rebecca was being selfish about her little interview, so I improvised. That's what responsible parents do. They find childcare." The audacity of that statement, calling herself responsible while defending abandoning her children with a stranger, broke something in me. "Responsible parents don't drop their kids at strangers' houses," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "Responsible parents don't lie to vulnerable women to manipulate them into free childcare. Responsible parents don't disappear for 10 hours to go shopping with their boyfriend of 1 week." "Don't you dare judge me!" Melissa snapped, her pleasant facade cracking. "You have no idea how hard it is being a single mom of 3. You get to have your career and your freedom and your perfect little life. I have no career because I've spent 6 years being your unpaid nanny," I interrupted. "I have no freedom because you've guilted me into sacrificing every opportunity to watch your children while you live like a teenager. And I have no perfect life because I've enabled your negligence for so long that you think it's normal to endanger your own kids." The room went silent. Even the children, sensing the tension, had stopped making noise. Melissa's face twisted with fury. "How dare you? After everything this family has done for you, everything you've done for me?" I laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. "Melissa, I've canceled job interviews, missed friends' weddings, and put my entire life on hold to accommodate your irresponsibility. The one time I set a boundary, you retaliated by putting 3 children in danger." "I didn't put them in danger. I found someone to watch them." "You left them with a stranger," Mom finally shouted, her usual gentle demeanor shattered. "Melissa, don't you understand? Anything could have happened to them. That woman could have been anyone." "But she wasn't," Melissa argued, as if that logic somehow justified her actions. "She was nice. Problem solved." I closed my laptop, decision crystallizing. Linda Fitzgerald said if something like this happens again, she's calling the police. She should have called them today. The threat hung in the air. Melissa's face went from angry to calculating. "You wouldn't." "Try me," I said simply. "I have everything documented now. Every time you've dumped the kids on me with no notice. Every time you've lied about where you were going or how long you'd be gone. Every time Mom and Dad have bailed you out financially while you spent child support money on yourself. And now I have today, proof that when your free childcare finally said no, you endangered your own children rather than act like an actual parent." "You're bluffing," Melissa said, but I could see the fear creeping into her eyes. I stood, gathering my things. "No more," I said to my parents. "No more enabling, no more excuses, no more sacrificing my life for her irresponsibility. I'm done." As I walked toward the door, Mom called after me, her voice breaking. "Rebecca, please. We'll talk to her. We'll make sure she understands." "You've been talking to her for 6 years, Mom. It's gotten worse, not better. Today she left 3 children with a stranger for 10 hours. What's it going to take for you to see that this isn't just immaturity or stress? This is dangerous neglect?" I didn't wait for an answer. I drove home, my hands shaking on the wheel, adrenaline finally crashing. In my apartment, my peaceful, quiet, child-free apartment. I sat down at my computer and began writing everything down in meticulous detail. Every incident, every manipulation, every endangered child. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia at Morrison Tech. Loved meeting you today. Team wants to move forward. Can you start next Monday? I stared at that message, then at the document I was creating. For the first time in 6 years, I had something concrete to protect. A real career opportunity, a fresh start, a life that belonged to me. But I also had 3 nieces and nephews who deserved better than a mother who viewed them as inconveniences rather than responsibilities. The question wasn't whether I'd follow through on my threat. The question was whether I'd do it for me or for them. The answer, I realized as I saved the document and opened my email, was both. Monday morning arrived with a notification that changed everything. I was reviewing Morrison Tech's employee handbook when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Linda Fitzgerald. Your sister just knocked on my door again with the kids. I'm calling CPS this time. Thought you should know. My coffee mug hit the counter harder than intended. It had been less than 72 hours since the first incident. Melissa had already violated every promise our parents had extracted from her during their weekend-long intervention. I texted back immediately. Do it. I'll provide a statement if needed. Linda's response came within seconds. Already on the phone with them. She's sitting in her car watching my house like I'm going to change my mind. This is insane. I grabbed my laptop and drove straight to Linda's address. When I arrived, Melissa's Toyota was indeed parked across the street, and through Linda's front window, I could see her pacing while talking on the phone, 3 children visible on the couch behind her. Melissa spotted me and jumped from her car, fury radiating from every step. You turned her against me. Linda won't watch the kids because of whatever lies you told her. I told her the truth, I said calmly, pulling out my phone to record, that you abandoned 3 children with her for 10 hours last week. That's not childcare. That's criminal neglect. I'm their mother. I decide what's best for them, then decide to actually parent them instead of treating them like luggage you can drop anywhere convenient. Melissa's face contorted with rage. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss. You're just jealous. Jealous that I have kids and you don't. Jealous that men actually want to be with me while you're alone with your sad little career that's never going anywhere. Before I could respond, a sedan pulled up marked with the Department of Children and Family Services logo. A woman in her 40s emerged, carrying a tablet and wearing an expression that suggested she'd seen variations of this scene too many times. I'm Vanessa Morrison, CPS investigator, she announced, approaching Linda's door. I received a call about abandoned minors. Melissa's demeanor shifted instantly to tears and victimhood. There's been a misunderstanding. I just asked my neighbor to watch my kids for an hour while I ran errands. My sister is trying to destroy my family because she's bitter and jealous. Vanessa's expression didn't change. She'd clearly heard similar stories before. Ma'am, I need to speak with the person who made the report. Are you the homeowner? She asked Linda, who had opened the door. Yes, Linda Fitzgerald. Those 3 children have been here since 7:30 this morning. Their mother, she pointed at Melissa, told me she needed someone to watch them for just an hour while she went to a job interview. When I said I wasn't available, she literally placed the baby in my arms and drove away. That was 4 hours ago. Vanessa made notes on her tablet. And you are? She asked me. Rebecca Sterling, their aunt. I can provide documented evidence of a pattern of neglectful behavior, including the incident last Thursday when she abandoned these same children with Ms. Fitzgerald for 10 hours. Melissa lunged toward me, but Vanessa stepped between us smoothly. Ma'am, I need you to remain calm, or I'll call for police assistance. Let's talk inside with the children present so I can assess their immediate safety. What followed was the most professionally devastating hour of Melissa's life. Linda provided her account with dates, times, and the detail that Melissa had given her a disconnected phone number. I shared my documentation, screenshots of texts, a timeline of incidents, financial records showing child support payments Melissa had spent on herself. Vanessa interviewed Aiden, whose 6-year-old honesty proved damning. Mommy leaves us places a lot. Sometimes I don't know the people. Sometimes I'm scared. Emma at 4 simply said, I'm hungry. We didn't have breakfast. Vanessa checked the diaper bag Melissa had left. It contained 1 diaper for an 18-month-old who needed changing every few hours, no food, no change of clothes, and a bottle with formula that had been sitting unrefrigerated for 4 hours. Ms. Sterling, Vanessa addressed Melissa formally, I'm going to need you to contact a family member who can take custody of these children while we complete our investigation. Investigation? Melissa's voice rose to a shriek. For what? I'm their mother. For potential child neglect and abandonment, the pattern described by multiple witnesses, combined with inadequate supplies for their care, and your 4-hour absence after being explicitly told childcare wasn't available, raises serious concerns about their safety. I watched Melissa's face cycle through denial, rage, and finally calculation. My parents, she said quietly. They can take them. Vanessa nodded. Contact them. They need to be here within the hour, or I'll need to place the children in emergency foster care while we assess the situation. The word foster broke something in Melissa's composure. She called Mom, who answered on the first ring, probably expecting another crisis. Whatever Melissa said made Mom's voice audible even from across the room. CPS is there? Melissa, what have you done? Our parents arrived in 40 minutes. Mom's eyes red from crying. Dad's jaw set in that particular way that meant he was past anger into cold determination. They listened to Vanessa's summary. Mom's hand over her mouth, Dad's complexion growing paler with each detail. We'll take them, Dad said when Vanessa finished, for as long as necessary. I'll need to complete a home study, Vanessa explained. Typically within 72 hours. Ms. Sterling, she addressed Melissa, you're not to have unsupervised contact with your children until our investigation concludes. If you violate this order, they will be removed from family custody entirely. You can't do this, Melissa screamed. They're my children. And they deserve better than being abandoned with strangers, Vanessa said simply. She handed Mom paperwork to sign, including temporary emergency custody forms. As our parents loaded the kids into their car, Aiden quiet, Emma confused, Noah blissfully unaware, Melissa turned her fury on me. This is your fault. You called them. You planned this. I didn't call CPS, I said honestly. Linda did. But you're right about one thing. I stopped enabling you. That's on me, and I don't regret it. Vanessa approached me as Melissa stormed to her car. Ms. Sterling, I'll need your formal statement. Can you come to our office tomorrow? I start a new job tomorrow, I said. But I can do Wednesday? She handed me a card. Wednesday works. Bring any documentation you have. Based on what I've seen today, we'll likely be pursuing neglect charges. That evening, I sat in my quiet apartment preparing for my first day at Morrison Tech while my phone exploded with messages. Melissa's rage manifested in increasingly unhinged texts, death threats, accusations, and finally a concerning message at 11 p.m. You've destroyed everything. I hope you're happy. This blood is on your hands. I forwarded that message to Vanessa, who responded immediately. Taking this seriously. Does she own firearms? The question sent ice through my veins. I called Dad. Does Melissa have any weapons? His pause answered before his words did. She bought a handgun last year after that break-in scare. Why? I explained the text. Dad's breath caught. I'm going to her apartment. Stay where you are and lock your doors. Dad found Melissa passed out drunk, the gun unloaded on her coffee table, surrounded by empty wine bottles and a half-written suicide note that blamed me for ruining her life. He called the crisis intervention team, who transported her to a psychiatric facility for a mandatory 72-hour hold. Wednesday's meeting with Vanessa lasted 3 hours. I provided everything: 6 years of documentation, financial records showing Melissa's child support misuse, testimony about the pattern of abandonment, and character statements from people who'd witnessed her neglect. Vanessa's expression grew grimmer with each piece of evidence. This is one of the clearest cases I've seen, she admitted. Most neglect situations have gray areas. This is black and white. What happens now? We file for dependency. Legal custody transfers to the state while we determine if reunification is possible. Given the suicide attempt and psychiatric hold, plus the documented pattern of endangerment, I'm recommending supervised visitation only for a minimum of 6 months, contingent on her completing parenting classes, substance abuse evaluation, and mental health treatment. And if she refuses? Vanessa's expression hardened. Then we pursue termination of parental rights and look for permanent placement with family or adoption. The reality of those words settled over me. 3 children potentially losing their mother permanently because she'd valued brunch dates over their safety. At Morrison Tech, my first week exceeded expectations. Patricia praised my code reviews, and I quickly became integral to a project launching in 6 weeks. But my phone remained a constant source of chaos. Mom calling about Noah's diaper rash. Dad asking how to handle Emma's nightmares. Frantic texts from relatives who'd heard various versions of the story and wanted my side. The family fractured predictably. Melissa's supporters, mostly distant relatives who'd never actually witnessed her parenting, accused me of vindictiveness and family betrayal. Those who'd seen the reality rallied behind the decision to involve CPS. Our grandmother, typically Switzerland neutral in family conflicts, called me directly, "You did the right thing. Those babies deserve safety." Melissa completed her psychiatric hold and was released with mandatory outpatient therapy. She immediately violated Vanessa's order by showing up at our parents' house demanding to see the kids. Dad called the police, who escorted her away with a warning that further violations would result in arrest. At her first supervised visitation, observed by a CPS worker at a neutral facility, Melissa spent 30 minutes crying and blaming me before Aiden asked, "Why are you sad, Mommy? We're okay with Grandma and Grandpa." Her face crumpled. The CPS worker's report noted, Mother appeared more focused on her own emotional state than children's well-being. Minimal age-appropriate interaction. Children showed no distress at visit's end. 2 weeks into my new job, I received an email from Kyle, Melissa's boyfriend. "You destroyed a good woman's life over jealousy. She told me everything about how you've always been threatened by her happiness. Hope you can live with yourself." I forwarded it to Vanessa without responding. She replied, "Adding to the file. This pattern of blame deflection supports our neglect findings." The preliminary hearing for the dependency case occurred 3 weeks after the initial CPS call. I attended, sitting in the back of the courtroom while Melissa's attorney argued that this was a family disagreement, blown out of proportion by a vindictive sister. The judge listened impassively, then reviewed the evidence. Multiple abandonment incidents, inadequate care provisions, the psychiatric hold, violation of supervised contact orders. The state's concerns appear well-founded, the judge ruled. Custody remains with grandparents pending completion of parents' treatment plan. Visitation stays supervised. We'll reconvene in 90 days to assess progress. Melissa's attorney requested she be allowed to address the court. The judge permitted it, and Melissa stood, her voice shaking with what I now recognized as performative emotion rather than genuine remorse. "Your Honor, my sister has poisoned everyone against me. She's always been jealous that I have children and she doesn't. She called CPS to punish me for having a life outside of motherhood. Those are my babies, and they need their mother." The judge's expression didn't soften. "Ms. Sterling, the evidence shows a pattern of placing your children in potentially dangerous situations with inadequate supervision. The court's priority is their safety, not your convenience. If you want custody restored, you'll complete every requirement of your treatment plan. This hearing is adjourned." Outside the courthouse, Melissa's mask finally slipped completely. She approached me in the parking lot, her face contorted with genuine hatred. "You've taken everything from me, my kids, my life, my future. I will never forgive you for this." "I didn't take anything," I said quietly. "You gambled with your children's safety and lost. That's on you, not me. They'll hate you someday," she hissed. "When they're older and understand what you did, they'll hate you for tearing apart their family." I met her eyes steadily. "When they're older, they'll understand I chose their safety over your feelings. I can live with that." As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of her in my rearview mirror, alone in the parking lot, the reality of consequences finally penetrating her wall of denial. Part of me felt the old guilt trying to surface, the familiar urge to fix things, to make peace. But then my phone buzzed with a photo from Mom. Aiden smiling while helping Dad make pancakes. Emma playing with toys in a clean, safe living room. Noah napping peacefully in a proper crib. 3 children who hadn't been abandoned with strangers in 3 weeks. 3 children with full bellies, clean clothes, and adults who prioritized their needs. The guilt evaporated. That evening, I opened my laptop and began documenting a new timeline. Not of Melissa's neglect, but of the children's progress. Aiden's nightmares decreasing, Emma's anxiety improving, Noah hitting developmental milestones he'd been delayed on. This wasn't about revenge or punishment anymore. This was about 3 innocent children finally getting the stability they deserved, even if it meant their mother had to face consequences she'd spent years avoiding. And for the first time in 6 years, I had my life back. A career, boundaries, and the clarity that enabling harm in the name of family wasn't love, it was cowardice. I was done being a coward. The Morrison Tech project consumed my days with blessed intensity. Code reviews, sprint planning, late-night debugging sessions. Each task was a reminder that I'd made the right choice. Patricia promoted me to lead developer within 6 weeks, a validation that felt like emerging from a 6-year fog into sunlight. But the family situation metastasized in ways I hadn't anticipated. Melissa completed her mandatory substance abuse evaluation, which revealed what anyone paying attention already knew. She'd been using alcohol as a coping mechanism for years, drinking heavily whenever stressed by her children's needs. The evaluator recommended intensive outpatient treatment and AA meetings, both non-negotiable for regaining custody. She attended exactly 3 meetings before declaring herself cured and demanding her children back. "This is ridiculous," she told anyone who'd listen. "I don't have a drinking problem. I had some wine to relax. That's normal." The CPS worker documenting her progress noted, "Client shows no insight into problematic behaviors, continues to blame external factors rather than accepting responsibility." At the 60-day review hearing, Melissa's attorney presented a very different picture. Testimony from Kyle about how devoted she was, character references from nail salon coworkers who'd never seen her parent, a carefully curated selection of Instagram photos showing her smiling with the kids at supervised visits. But Vanessa's counter-evidence was devastating. She presented the CPS worker's notes documenting Melissa's pattern. Arriving late to supervised visits, spending them on her phone, showing no interest when the kids discussed their daily lives with our parents. Most damning was a recording from last week's visit where Aiden asked, "Mommy, when can we come home?" And Melissa responded, "When Aunt Rebecca stops being evil." The judge's face hardened. "Ms. Sterling, your role is to demonstrate fitness to parent, not to alienate your children from family members. Custody remains with grandparents. Visitation continues supervised. Next review in 60 days. If you haven't shown substantial progress by then, we'll discuss termination proceedings." The word termination sent Melissa into hysterics. Her attorney had to physically restrain her as she screamed at me across the courtroom, "This is your fault! You're stealing my children!" The bailiff threatened to hold her in contempt. She fled the courthouse in tears, Kyle trailing behind, looking increasingly uncertain about his role in this drama. That evening, Dad called me from his car, voice heavy with exhaustion. "We need to talk about long-term plans." I met him at a coffee shop near his house. At 63, Dad looked older than his years, the stress of suddenly parenting 3 young children etched in the lines around his eyes. "Your mother and I can't do this forever," he said without preamble. "We love those kids, but we're too old for this. Noah's in his terrible 2s. Emma needs constant attention. Aiden's behavior is improving, but he still has nightmares about being left places." "What are you asking me?" He met my eyes directly. "If the court terminates Melissa's rights, would you consider adopting them?" The question landed like a physical blow. Me, at 28, suddenly becoming a single mother to 3 traumatized children, the same children whose mother I'd helped remove from custody. "Dad, I just started a career that actually matters. I have a 1-bedroom apartment. I'm not remotely prepared for—" "I know," he interrupted gently. "I know it's not fair. But Rebecca, you're the only one who's ever truly put those kids first. Melissa won't change. We see that now. Your mother and I will help however we can, but in 5 years, when Aiden's 11 and Emma's 9 and Noah's 6, we'll be pushing 70. They need someone younger, someone stable. They need their mother to get her act together." "That's not going to happen," he said flatly. "Helen and I have spent 60 days watching Melissa perform for the court while showing 0 genuine interest in her children's well-being. The supervised visit worker told Vanessa that Melissa spends most visits complaining about how unfair everything is, rather than engaging with the kids. She's not getting better, she's getting worse. I drove home through Seattle's evening traffic, Dad's question haunting me. Adoption meant ending my 20s as a single mother. It meant restructuring my entire life around 3 children who deserved better than the hand they'd been dealt. But it also meant they'd have stability, safety, someone who'd actually prioritize their needs over her social life. The decision crystallized over the next few weeks as I watched the situation deteriorate further. Kyle broke up with Melissa after attending one of her supervised visits and witnessing her complete disinterest in the children. She'd spent 30 minutes scrolling through his Instagram photos with other women instead of playing with Noah. "You're not the person you pretended to be," he told her, his voice cold. Their breakup, predictably, became my fault in Melissa's narrative. She violated the no-contact order again by showing up at my apartment building at midnight, drunk and screaming in the parking lot. "You stole my boyfriend! You stole my kids! You stole my life!" Building security called the police. She was arrested for violating a court order, public intoxication, and disorderly conduct. The judge added another 30 days to her treatment requirements and mandated random drug and alcohol testing. At Morrison Tech, my team celebrated launching our project ahead of schedule. Patricia took me to dinner to discuss my future with the company. Potential management track, significant salary increase, stock options. Everything I'd sacrificed for 6 years was finally within reach. That same week, I attended the 90-day review hearing. Melissa had completed exactly 40% of her required treatment plan, failed 2 alcohol tests, and hadn't attended parenting classes at all. Her attorney tried arguing she'd been focused on mental health treatment, but her therapist's report contradicted this. She'd attended 5 of 20 required sessions and spent them blaming everyone else for her situation. "I've reviewed the case file extensively," the judge said, her voice carrying the weight of difficult decisions made too often. "Ms. Sterling, you've shown no meaningful progress toward addressing the issues that brought your children into state custody. You've violated court orders repeatedly, failed to engage with treatment programs, and demonstrated no insight into your parenting deficits." Melissa's attorney stood. "Your Honor, my client has been dealing with severe depression and—" "Your client has been dealing with accountability," the judge interrupted sharply. "Something she's clearly unaccustomed to. I'm extending the current custody arrangement for another 6 months and ordering escalated treatment requirements. If substantial progress isn't demonstrated at our next review, I will initiate termination proceedings. Ms. Sterling, do you understand?" Melissa didn't answer. She sat frozen, the reality finally penetrating that tears and tantrums wouldn't fix this. After the hearing, Vanessa pulled me aside. "The state is preparing for potential termination. Have you thought about what happens to those kids if your parents can't continue caring for them?" My dad asked if I'd consider adoption. Her expression softened. "You'd be an excellent parent, but I need you to understand what you'd be taking on. 3 traumatized children who'll need therapy, patience, and probably years to fully trust that they won't be abandoned again." "I know." "Do you? Because right now you have a career, freedom, your 20s. Adoption means giving up all of that for children who might resent you someday for the role you played in removing their mother from their lives." Her bluntness was refreshing after weeks of people tiptoeing around the reality. They might resent me anyway if they end up in foster care because no one stepped up. Vanessa handed me paperwork. "Think about it seriously. We won't file for termination for another 4 months minimum. That gives you time to consider whether this is sacrifice or martyrdom." I took the adoption packet home and left it on my kitchen counter, where it sat like a grenade for 2 weeks while I wrestled with the decision. Then Emma's kindergarten called. Mom had listed me as an emergency contact, and the school's guidance counselor needed to discuss Emma's behavior. I left work early, driving to Lakewood Elementary with a sense of dread. The counselor, Mrs. Patterson, was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes that had seen too much. Emma's been acting out in class, aggressive behavior with other children, refusing to follow instructions, emotional outbursts that seem disproportionate to triggers. "She's been through a lot of instability," I said carefully. "I know. Your mother filled me in on the basics. But Rebecca, may I call you Rebecca? I want you to see something." She pulled out a folder of Emma's drawings from art class. The images were disturbing in their consistency. Stick figures of children alone in various settings, always with an adult figure walking away. One drawing showed 3 small figures sitting on a doorstep with a woman, clearly Emma's representation of herself, Aiden, and Noah, while a car drove away. The adult in the car had an X drawn over her face. "She drew that today," Mrs. Patterson said quietly. When I asked her about it, she said, "That's when Mommy left us with the stranger lady." "Rebecca, this child is processing abandonment trauma, and she needs intensive support." I stared at the drawings, my throat tight. This was what my refusal had protected, not abstract concepts of boundaries and consequences, but actual children whose mother's selfishness had carved wounds into their developing psyches. What does she need? Consistency? Therapy? But most importantly, she needs to know she's safe. Right now, she doesn't believe that. She thinks any adult might abandon her at any moment, and that belief is shaping how she interacts with the world. Driving home, I called Patricia and explained I needed to leave early more frequently for family obligations. Her response surprised me. "Rebecca, you're one of our strongest developers, but everyone has seasons where life requires different priorities. Figure out what you need to do, and we'll work around it." That evening, I visited my parents. All 3 kids were doing homework at the dining table, Aiden working on first-grade math, Emma coloring, more images of adults walking away, Noah destroying a coloring book with enthusiastic crayon violence. "Aunt Becca," Emma ran to me, throwing her arms around my waist. The trust in that gesture, the unearned faith that I wouldn't disappoint her like her mother had, nearly broke me. "Hey, Em, Mrs. Patterson showed me your drawings today." Her face fell. "Am I in trouble?" "No, sweetheart, but I want to understand what you're feeling. Can you tell me about this picture?" I pulled out my phone to show her a photo of the drawing. Emma looked at it seriously, her 4-year-old face too solemn for such a young child. "That's when Mommy left us with the nice lady, but the nice lady didn't know we were coming. I was scared the lady would be mad we were there." "Were you scared other times too?" She nodded. "Lots of times. Sometimes Mommy would leave us places and say she'd be back soon, but soon was really long. Aiden would take care of me and Noah, but he's just a kid too. He doesn't know how to make bottles right." My heart shattered. This was what Melissa's improvisation had looked like from a child's perspective. A 6-year-old trying to care for his baby brother while his 4-year-old sister waited for a mother who might or might not return. I looked at Aiden, who'd been listening while pretending to focus on his math. His eyes met mine, and I saw something that no 6-year-old should have. Weary knowledge of adult failures and childhood responsibilities he'd shouldered too young. "You're safe now," I told them both. "Grandma and Grandpa won't leave you, and I won't either." "Promise?" Emma asked, her voice small. The word stuck in my throat because promises had been broken so many times for these children. But I looked at her hopeful face, at Aiden's desperate need to believe, at Noah happily destroying his coloring book, oblivious to the adult drama that had shaped his young life. "I promise," I said, knowing that promise would require everything I'd been building for myself. That night, I filled out the adoption paperwork. The decision wasn't noble or heroic. It was simply the only choice I could live with. These children had been collateral damage in Melissa's pursuit of eternal adolescence. Someone needed to choose them first, and if that someone had to be me, then so be it. I met with Vanessa the following week to discuss the process. "You understand this means Melissa will likely never forgive you," she warned. "She'll never forgive me anyway. At least this way. Her kids have stability. The court will want home studies, financial verification, character references. The process typically takes 6 to 12 months from petition to finalization." "Then let's start." Word of my adoption petition reached Melissa within days, our family's gossip network ensuring nothing stayed private. Her response was a 12-minute voicemail that cycled through every emotion. Rage, grief, threats, pleading, more threats. "You're stealing my children. You've wanted this from the beginning. You were jealous I had kids and you didn't. So you manipulated everyone into giving them to you. I'll fight this. I'll prove you're unfit. I'll make sure everyone knows what a vindictive, evil person you are." I saved the voicemail and forwarded it to Vanessa, who added it to the growing file documenting Melissa's instability. The next supervised visit descended into chaos. Melissa spent the entire hour crying and telling the children that Aunt Becca is trying to take you away from Mommy forever. Aiden, old enough to understand the implications, became visibly distressed. Emma cried in confusion. Noah, blessed toddler oblivion, played with blocks throughout the drama. The CPS worker ended the visit early and filed an incident report, noting that Melissa had used her time with the children to continue her pattern of blame deflection rather than providing appropriate parenting. At the next hearing, the judge's patience finally expired. Ms. Sterling, you've had 5 months to demonstrate fitness to parent. Instead, you've regressed. You've violated court orders, failed treatment requirements, and now you're using supervised visits to emotionally manipulate your children. I'm suspending your visitation privileges for 60 days and accelerating termination proceedings. You have 60 days to complete your treatment plan in its entirety, or I will terminate your parental rights permanently. Melissa's scream echoed through the courtroom. You can't do this! They're my children! They are children who deserve better than what you've provided, the judge said coldly. Court is adjourned. I sat in the back of the courtroom, watching bailiffs escort my hysterical sister from the room. Part of me, the part that remembered childhood summers and shared secrets, grieved for her. But the larger part looked at the 3 children sitting quietly with my parents and knew this was right. Later that evening, Dad called with unexpected news. Melissa checked herself into residential treatment. Her attorney convinced her it was her last chance. Will she actually complete it? I don't know, but for the first time, she seems to understand the stakes. I wanted to feel hope, but 6 years of broken promises had taught me better. Still, if residential treatment gave her the wake-up call she needed, maybe those 3 children could eventually have a relationship with a healthier version of their mother. But they'd have it from the safety of my home, with someone who'd chosen them first. Melissa lasted 19 days in residential treatment before walking out against medical advice. The facility called my parents at 6 a.m. to report she'd signed herself out, claiming the program was too intense and unrealistic about single motherhood challenges. She's given up, Mom said when she called to tell me. Her voice carried a flatness I'd never heard before, the sound of hope dying. Your father and I, we've accepted it now. She's not going to change. The termination hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In that time, Melissa made one final, desperate play that revealed just how far she'd fallen. She hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on me. The investigator, a man named Doug Fletcher who specialized in custody cases, contacted my ex-boyfriends, college roommates, and even tracked down people I'd barely known in high school. He was looking for anything: substance abuse, mental health issues, evidence of instability, proof I was unfit to parent. He found nothing because there was nothing to find. My life had been unremarkably stable, boringly responsible, predictably reliable. The most scandalous thing in my history was a speeding ticket from 3 years ago. Undeterred, Melissa's attorney tried a different angle. They subpoenaed my employment records at Morrison Tech, attempting to argue that my demanding job made me unavailable for parenting. Patricia's response, submitted to the court, was devastating to their case. Ms. Sterling has demonstrated exceptional time management, reliability, and the ability to balance professional obligations with personal responsibilities. She's never missed a deadline, maintains open communication about scheduling needs, and has shown the exact kind of organizational skills that suggest she would excel at managing a household with children. We enthusiastically support her adoption petition. Melissa's attorney then tried arguing I'd orchestrated this entire situation out of jealousy, that I'd deliberately sabotaged her childcare arrangements to create a CPS case. The judge shut that down immediately. Counsel, are you seriously arguing that your client is the victim when she repeatedly abandoned her children with strangers and violated court orders? The evidence shows a clear pattern of neglect, independent of Ms. Rebecca Sterling's actions. On the day of the termination hearing, the courtroom was packed. Our extended family filled the gallery, some supporting Melissa, most supporting the children's need for stability. The tension was thick enough to cut. Melissa took the stand first. Her attorney had coached her well. She wore conservative clothing, minimal makeup, spoke in measured tones about her struggles and growth. She testified about her 19 days in treatment, framing her departure as realizing the program wasn't the right fit, rather than admitting she'd quit. I love my children, she said, tears streaming. I've made mistakes, but I'm their mother. They need me. Then came cross-examination from the state's attorney, a woman named Julia Chen who'd built her career on child advocacy cases. Ms. Sterling, how many of your required 20 parenting classes did you complete? I attended some of them. How many specifically? 3. 3 out of 20. How many of your required substance abuse counseling sessions? I didn't need those. I don't have a problem. You failed 2 court-ordered alcohol tests. Do you remember that? Melissa's composure cracked. Those tests were wrong. Both tests? Administered by different facilities? Both wrong? I had 1 glass of wine. That's normal. Ms. Sterling, do you remember the incident on May 12th where you knocked on Linda Fitzgerald's door and abandoned your 3 children with a complete stranger for 10 hours? I didn't abandon them. I found childcare. Childcare implies consent, planning, and appropriate supplies. You left 1 diaper for an 18-month-old, no food, and a disconnected phone number. That's abandonment. Julia systematically dismantled every excuse, every justification, every attempt at reframing. By the time Melissa left the stand, she was sobbing openly, her attorney looking grim. Then Vanessa testified, presenting the complete timeline. 6 months of supervision, multiple violations, 0 meaningful progress, and a pattern of behavior suggesting Melissa viewed her children as burdens rather than responsibilities. In my 15 years as a CPS investigator, Vanessa concluded, I've rarely seen such clear-cut neglect combined with such complete lack of insight. This mother poses an ongoing risk to these children's safety and well-being. Linda Fitzgerald testified next, describing both abandonment incidents in detail. Her voice shook with remembered fear. I kept thinking, what if something had happened to one of them while they were in my care? I wasn't prepared, didn't have proper supplies, didn't know their medical history or allergies. It was criminally irresponsible. Finally, I took the stand. Melissa's attorney tried painting me as a jealous sister who'd weaponized the system. Isn't it true you've always resented your sister's children? No, I resented being treated as free childcare with 0 notice or consideration for my life. I love those children. That's why I reported the neglect. You wanted them for yourself. I wanted them safe. Whether that was with Melissa getting help and becoming a fit parent, or with someone else, I wanted them safe. That's what this entire case is about. Not what Melissa wants or what I want, but what those 3 children deserve. And you think you can provide that? I know I can. I've completed home studies, financial planning, parenting classes, and trauma-informed care training. I've arranged flexible work schedules, set up rooms in a new 3-bedroom house, and established relationships with therapists who specialize in childhood abandonment trauma. I've done everything required and more because those children deserve someone who actually prioritizes their needs. The judge called a brief recess. When we returned, her expression was grave. I've reviewed the entire case file, heard testimony from all parties, and consulted with child welfare experts. This is one of the most clear-cut cases of parental neglect I've encountered. Ms. Melissa Sterling has shown no meaningful insight into her behavior, completed minimal treatment requirements, violated court orders repeatedly, and continues to blame external factors rather than accepting responsibility. Melissa started crying again, but the judge continued, unmoved. These children deserve stability, safety, and a caregiver who prioritizes their well-being above personal desires. Ms. Melissa Sterling has proven incapable of providing that care. Therefore, I am terminating her parental rights to all 3 minor children effective immediately. The courtroom erupted. Melissa's supporters gasped and shouted. Our parents sat in stunned silence. They'd known this was likely, but the finality still shocked them. I felt nothing except a strange sense of completion, like finishing a marathon I hadn't wanted to run, but had somehow survived. Furthermore, the judge continued over the noise, I am granting the adoption petition filed by Rebecca Sterling. The children will remain in her custody pending finalization of adoption proceedings, which I'm expediting given the established relationship and time the children have already spent in her care. Melissa lunged from her seat, security intercepting her before she reached me. You stole my children. You destroyed my family. I'll never forgive you. Never. The judge ordered her removed from the courtroom. As bailiffs escorted her out, still screaming threats and accusations, I sat motionless, processing the reality that I'd just become a mother to 3 traumatized children. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered. Someone had tipped off the local news about the dramatic case. I shielded my face and hurried to my car, where Dad was waiting with the kids. Did you win? Aiden asked, his 6-year-old understanding just enough to know something important had happened. "Yes," I said simply. "You're all staying with me now. Officially." "Forever?" Emma's voice was small, scared to hope. I knelt to her level, meeting her eyes directly. "Forever, I promise." Noah, oblivious, threw his stuffed rabbit at my head in toddler affection. The first few weeks were chaos. I'd moved into a 3-bedroom house specifically to accommodate them, but turning a space into a home took time. Emma had nightmares every night. Aiden wet the bed twice from stress. Noah, mercifully, adapted easiest. At 2, he barely remembered the instability. Morrison Tech granted me 4 weeks parental leave, a benefit I hadn't expected. Patricia sent a gift basket with a note. "Congratulations on your instant family. Take the time you need. We'll be here when you're ready." The adoption finalization hearing was anticlimactic compared to the termination proceedings. The judge reviewed my home study reports, financial statements, and character references before declaring it done. With the strike of her gavel, I officially became mom to 3 children who'd been through hell. Melissa didn't attend. She'd left Washington entirely, moving to California to start fresh. Her final text to me, sent at 2 a.m. on her first night in LA, was simple. "I hope you're satisfied with what you've destroyed." I deleted it without responding. 3 months into our new normal, Emma stopped drawing pictures of abandonment. Instead, her kindergarten art folder filled with images of a house with 4 people, all holding hands, all smiling, none walking away. "That's our family," she told me proudly. "You, me, Aiden, and Noah. We stay together." Mrs. Patterson called it a breakthrough. I called it evidence that stability was working. The nightmares decreased from nightly to weekly to occasionally. Aiden's bedwetting stopped entirely. Noah started calling me Mama instead of Aunt Becca, and I didn't correct him because titles mattered less than the love behind them. But Melissa's absence wasn't peaceful. It was a storm gathering on the horizon. 6 months after the termination, she returned to Seattle unannounced. I discovered this through a frantic call from the kids' school principal. A woman claiming to be the children's mother had attempted to remove Aiden and Emma from school during lunch. Security had stopped her, police were called, and could I please come immediately? I left Morrison Tech mid-meeting, Patricia waving me off with understanding. At the school, I found Melissa in handcuffs arguing with officers while Aiden and Emma clung to their guidance counselor, terrified. "I'm their mother!" Melissa screamed when she saw me. Tell them I'm their mother." "You were their mother," I said coldly. "Your rights were terminated. You're legally a stranger now." Her face contorted with rage and something that might have been real grief. "How can you just replace me? How can they just forget I exist?" "They haven't forgotten. Emma still sometimes cries for you at night. Aiden asks questions I don't know how to answer. But they're learning that the person who feeds them, reads to them, shows up for them, that's who matters, not biology." The police escorted her away. She'd be charged with attempted custodial interference, violating restraining orders, and trespassing. Her public defender would eventually argue for leniency given her mental health struggles, but the judge imposed a 3-year suspended sentence with strict conditions: no contact with the children, mandatory continued therapy, and GPS monitoring to ensure she stayed away from their school and home. That evening, I held Emma while she sobbed, confused about why seeing her mother had felt scary instead of happy. Aiden, old enough to intellectually understand, but young enough to still hurt, asked the question that had no good answer. Why doesn't mommy want to be a good mommy? Some people can't be what we need them to be, I said carefully. It's not about you being worth it. You're worth everything. It's about her being unable to do the work it takes to be a parent. But you did the work, he said, and you're not even our real mom. I'm your real mom now. Real is who shows up. Melissa's attempted kidnapping became a turning point for our extended family. The relatives who'd defended her claimed she just needed time, insisted family meant forgiveness. They finally saw clearly what she'd become. My aunt called to apologize for doubting my actions. We thought you were being harsh, she admitted. But seeing her try to take those kids from school, seeing how terrified they were of her. Rebecca, you saved them, but Melissa's supporters didn't completely disappear. Her former attorney started a blog, framing her as a victim of a vindictive sister and an unjust system. The narrative gained minor traction in certain parental rights activist circles, people who believed termination was always wrong regardless of circumstances. I ignored it until the blog published my home address. The first letter arrived 2 weeks later, handwritten in capital letters. "Child stealer, you destroyed a family. Karma will find you." Then another. "Those kids will hate you when they're old enough to understand what you did. You're a kidnapper." I filed police reports, increased home security, and had a very honest conversation with the kids about strangers and safety. The letters kept coming, sometimes threatening, sometimes just hateful, all forwarding to the police who traced them back to members of a parental rights forum. "Unfortunately," the detective explained, "unless there's a direct threat, this falls under protected speech. We'll monitor the situation, but I recommend you vary your routine, stay vigilant. Living under siege while raising 3 traumatized children and maintaining a demanding career tested every limit I had." But Morrison Tech's support never wavered. Patricia arranged remote work when needed, hired security for the parking garage, and made it clear that my family's safety mattered more than any deadline. "You're one of us," she said simply. "We protect our own." A year after adoption finalization, Melissa violated her restraining order by showing up at our house at midnight, drunk and pounding on the door. The security system alerted police automatically. When they arrived, she was sitting on my front steps crying. "I just want to see them," she sobbed. "Just 5 minutes, please." "Ma'am, you're violating a court order," the officer said firmly. "They're my babies." "They were your babies. Now they're someone else's children, and you need to leave." She lunged at me as I stood in the doorway. "This is your fault. You turned them against me. You stole them." The officers restrained her, and this time the judge wasn't lenient. She served 45 days in jail for violating the restraining order, and upon release, was ordered to leave Washington state entirely as a condition of probation. 2 years after becoming their mother, I attended Aiden's 3rd grade parent-teacher conference. His teacher, Mr. Harrison, had nothing but praise. "Aiden is thriving. His reading level jumped 2 grades this year. He's making friends, and the anxiety issues noted in his file from kindergarten have completely resolved." "He's had a lot of support," I said. "He's had a mother who shows up," Mr. Harrison corrected. "I've been teaching 15 years. I know what difference that makes." Emma's kindergarten teacher said similar things: confident, happy, excelling socially and academically. Noah, now 4, was in preschool and, according to his teacher, the most well-adjusted child in his class. They weren't perfect. Emma still had moments of anxiety about abandonment. Aiden occasionally tested boundaries to see if I'd give up on him like his birth mother had. Noah had typical toddler tantrums. But they were normal problems of normal childhood, not the trauma responses of kids who'd been treated as inconveniences. At Morrison Tech, I'd made senior architect, a promotion that came with significant salary increase and the flexibility to set my own hours. Patricia had become not just my boss but my friend, attending Emma's kindergarten graduation and bringing birthday gifts for all 3 kids. "You know," she said at Emma's graduation party, watching the kids play in our backyard, "when you first told me about the adoption, I worried it would derail your career. Instead, you became the most organized, efficient, deadline-conscious person on my team. Turns out parenting skills translate perfectly to project management." The party was filled with our new community, neighbors who'd welcomed us, teachers who'd supported the kids, friends from the single parents group I'd joined. My parents were there, finally able to enjoy their grandchildren without the burden of primary custody. The family members who mattered had rallied around us. Conspicuously absent was Melissa, now living in Nevada, working at a gym, and dating a man she'd met online. According to the sparse social media presence I occasionally monitored for safety reasons, she was presenting herself as child-free by choice, never mentioning the 3 children she'd lost. "Do you ever regret it?" Dad asked quietly, watching me chase Noah around the yard while balancing a plate of cake. "Your career could have gone further without kids. You could have traveled, dated, lived your 20s. I looked at Aiden helping Emma open a present, at Noah's sticky face covered in frosting, at the home we'd built together from the wreckage of Melissa's neglect. "I regret that it was necessary," I said honestly. "I regret that 3 kids went through trauma that will affect them forever." But do I regret stepping up? Not for a second. That night, after kids were bathed and storied and tucked in, I stood in the doorway of their rooms watching them sleep. Emma clutched her stuffed bear, peaceful. Aiden's nightlight cast soft shadows, his breathing steady and calm. Noah snored softly, sprawled across his toddler bed in that utterly relaxed way only secure children achieve. These children were mine now, not by biology but by choice, sacrifice, and the daily decision to show up when someone else had walked away. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I opened it. I know where you work. I know where the kids go to school. You think you've won, but this isn't over. They'll learn the truth eventually. M. I forwarded it to the detective handling our case, blocked the number, and checked that our security system was armed. Then I poured a glass of wine and sat on my back porch, looking at the swing set Dad had installed last month. Melissa would never stop being angry. Her supporters would always paint her as the victim. Someone would always believe her narrative of sisterly jealousy and family betrayal. But 3 children slept safely in their beds, woke up to packed lunches and homework help, came home to someone who actually wanted them there. They had therapy appointments I never missed, school events I attended proudly, a mother who chose them every single day. The truth was simpler than any narrative Melissa could spin. She'd gambled with her children's safety, and I'd made sure she lost, and I'd spend the rest of my life making sure they won. 5 years after the adoption finalization, Melissa died alone in a Nevada hospital from complications of alcoholism. She was 38. The call came from a coroner's office, tracking me down through old court records since I was listed as next of kin for her biological children. The woman on the phone was professionally sympathetic. We need someone to make arrangements. Are you willing to claim the body? I sat in my office at Morrison Tech, staring at the cityscape through my window while processing that my sister, the person I'd once shared a childhood with, was gone. The emotion that surfaced wasn't grief, but something more complicated. Relief mixed with residual anger, mixed with the faint echo of old love. What about personal effects? I asked. Very little. Some clothing, a wallet with 43s, and a journal. We can mail them if you provide an address. I gave them my information and sat with the knowledge that Melissa's entire existence had condensed down to a box of belongings and a body awaiting burial. No partner mourning her, no friends claiming her, just the sister who'd helped remove her children and the 3 kids who barely remembered her. That evening, I gathered Aiden, now 11, Emma, 9, and Noah, 7, in our living room. They'd known Melissa was their biological mother. We'd been honest from the beginning, age-appropriately, but she'd been an abstraction, a person who existed more in therapy sessions than reality. I need to tell you something, I began carefully. Your birth mother passed away yesterday. The reactions were telling. Aiden's face showed brief surprise, then returned to neutral. Melissa had been a concept, not a person he mourned. Emma's eyes filled with tears, though I suspected they were more about the idea of maternal loss than actual grief for someone she couldn't remember. Noah, who'd been 4 when the adoption finalized, looked confused. The lady from the pictures? He asked. Yes, sweetheart. Oh. He returned to his Legos, the deceased stranger already forgotten. Emma asked the question I'd been expecting. Are you sad? I'm sad about what could have been, I answered honestly. Sad that she never got healthy, never became the person she could have been, but I'm not sad about our life together, because that's been beautiful. Aiden, perceptive as always, asked, do we have to go to a funeral? Only if you want to. None of them wanted to. I arranged for cremation, paid for it with money I didn't begrudge because she'd been my sister once. The journal arrived 3 days later, a cheap notebook filled with Melissa's handwriting documenting the last years of her life. Reading it was like watching a disaster in slow motion. The entries started relatively normal. Complaints about work, excitement about a new boyfriend, plans for the future. Then they deteriorated. Rants about me, stealing her life, fantasies about reconciliation with the kids, increasingly desperate attempts to connect with people who inevitably left when they realized how damaged she was. One entry, dated 6 months before her death, stopped me cold. Saw Rebecca's promotion announcement on LinkedIn today. Senior architect at Morrison Tech, leading some innovative project. She has my life, the career, the success, the recognition, and she has my children. I gave her everything and she turned it into a perfect life while I have nothing. I hate her, but I also understand now that she was right. I wasn't fit to be their mother. I'm not fit for anything. I just wish I'd figured that out before I lost everything. That was the closest she'd ever come to accepting responsibility. Brief clarity before the spiral continued downward. The final entry, written the day before she died. Tomorrow I'm supposed to start another program. 7th attempt at sobriety. I won't go. I'm tired of trying to become someone I'm fundamentally not. My kids don't know me. My family has moved on. I exist in this weird space of being alive but having no life. Maybe that's karma. Maybe this is what I deserve for being such a shitty mother. Rebecca was a better mother in 1 year than I was in 6. I hope my babies are happy. I hope they never think about me because thinking about me would mean remembering bad things. I hope Rebecca tells them I love them even though I didn't know how to show it. I closed the journal and cried. Not for who Melissa had been, but for who she could have been if she'd made different choices, sought help sooner, prioritized her children over her ego. At Morrison Tech the next day, Patricia found me staring at my computer without actually working. Everything okay? I explained about Melissa. Patricia listened without judgment, then said something I needed to hear. You gave her multiple chances to choose differently. She didn't. That's not your failure, it's hers. The kids processed Melissa's death in their own ways. Emma asked her therapist about it, working through complicated feelings about the death of someone you biologically came from, but never really knew. Aiden seemed unaffected on the surface, but started asking questions about his early childhood. What had Melissa been like before everything fell apart? I answered honestly. She was fun and spontaneous, and made people laugh. She was also unreliable and impulsive and put herself first. People are complicated. They can be good in some ways and harmful in others. Noah asked just once, if our first mom is dead, does that mean you're our only mom now? I've been your only mom for years, buddy. Nothing changed except now it's permanent. He nodded, satisfied, and never brought it up again. 6 months after Melissa's death, I received a letter from her estate attorney. Apparently, she'd had a small life insurance policy through her gym employer, and in a moment of either sentiment or spite, she'd never changed the beneficiary from her children. The policy was worth $50, $8, to be split between Aiden, Emma, and Noah. I put it in college funds for them, the final thing Melissa ever provided for the children she'd lost. A year after her death, I was promoted to VP of Engineering at Morrison Tech, a position that came with significant responsibility, substantial salary, and the flexibility to still prioritize my kids. The promotion was announced at a company meeting where Patricia introduced me with words that meant more than any title. Rebecca Sterling exemplifies what we value at Morrison Tech: brilliance, reliability, and the ability to juggle competing priorities without sacrificing quality. She's raised 3 kids as a single mother while consistently delivering exceptional work. That's the kind of person we want leading our teams. The applause felt validating not just professionally, but personally. Proof that the sacrifice hadn't destroyed my career, it had refined it. That evening, I attended Aiden's middle school science fair, Emma's soccer game, and still made it home in time to read Noah a bedtime story. It was exhausting and chaotic, and nothing like the life I'd planned at 28. It was also exactly where I was supposed to be. Years continued their forward march. Aiden grew into a thoughtful teenager interested in environmental science, his early trauma channeled into desire to protect and heal. Emma became a fierce advocate for other kids, volunteering at after-school programs for children in foster care. Noah, blessed to remember little of the chaos, was simply a happy kid who loved soccer and comic books and annoying his siblings in typical younger brother fashion. They knew their story. We'd always been honest about how our family formed. They knew about Melissa, about the court case, about my role in their removal from her custody. As they got older, I worried they'd resent me for it. Instead, on my 40th birthday, Aiden gave me a card he'd written himself. Mom, thanks for choosing us when you didn't have to. Thanks for showing up every day when someone else walked away. Thanks for being proof that family isn't about biology. It's about commitment. We know our story is complicated, but we also know we're lucky it ended with you. Happy birthday. Aiden. Emma added her own note. You taught me that real love is action, not just words. Everything you do proves that. Love you, Mom. Noah, now 13 and perpetually hungry, just wrote, "You're the best. Can we have pizza for your birthday?" I laughed through tears at the profound mixed with the mundane, the perfect summary of motherhood. That evening, our found family gathered. My parents, now in their 70s but still active in the kids' lives, Patricia and her husband, neighbors who'd become friends, kids from their schools and sports teams. Our house overflowed with noise and life and love. Dad pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Your mother and I were talking. Do you remember that day in the coffee shop when I asked if you'd consider adopting them?" "Of course. I was so worried we were ruining your life. Asking too much. You were only 28 with a career just starting. You were giving me a gift," I said. "I just didn't know it yet." He hugged me, this man who'd raised me and then watched me raise his grandchildren. "We're proud of you, Rebecca. Not just for what you accomplished professionally, but for who you became personally. You saved those kids." "They saved me too," I said honestly. "Gave me purpose beyond just existing." As the party wound down and kids started falling asleep on various couches, I stood in my backyard looking at the life I'd built. The swing set that had seen years of use, the garden Emma had helped plant, the basketball hoop where Aiden practiced shots, the life that had emerged from that morning when I'd sent a single text. "No, find someone else." That refusal had cost me my sister, my 20s, the life I'd planned. But it had given me 3 incredible humans who called me Mom, a career I'd built around their needs, and the knowledge that I'd chosen right when it mattered most. Melissa would never know her children became wonderful people. She'd never see Aiden's science awards or Emma's athletic achievements or Noah's infectious humor. She'd lost all of that the day she chose brunch over responsibility. And I'd gained everything the day I chose their safety over enabling her dysfunction. The equation wasn't complicated. She'd gambled with 3 lives and lost. I'd stepped up when someone had to, and we'd all won. Standing in that backyard, watching through the window as Aiden helped Noah carry Emma, who'd fallen asleep mid-movie, upstairs, I felt something I hadn't expected. Gratitude. Not for the trauma that brought us together, but for the resilience that let us build something beautiful from wreckage. Not for Melissa's failures, but for the chance to show her children what commitment looked like. Not for the sacrifice, but for the life that sacrifice created. 3 children slept safely in a home where they'd never doubt they were wanted. A sister was gone, but a family remained, built not on obligation or biology, but on the daily choice to show up, do the work, and love unconditionally. That was Melissa's final lesson, though she never intended to teach it, that being a parent isn't about biology or rights or ownership. It's about sacrifice, consistency, and choosing your children's needs over your own desires. She'd failed that test spectacularly. I'd passed it every single day for 12 years, and I'd keep passing it for as long as these 3 incredible humans needed me. Because that's what real mothers do. They choose their children, not once, but every day. Even when it's hard, even when it costs everything, even when it means becoming someone you never planned to be. Especially then.